Yeah, and then you can take it away. Off you go.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to spend your Thursday evening with us for this DSEP Network and Learn session. So today, Charles is going to be taking us through some of his research and presentation on supporting ethnic minorities athletes. So we're going to leave it over to him. I will say, if you do have any questions, me and Emily are going to be monitoring the chat, and to make sure these sessions are the best for you guys, we're going to provide some feedback, a feedback link at the end. So please make sure you do provide feedback. And yeah, I will hand over to you now, Charles. I'll turn my camera off as well.
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay. So yeah, this is my I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Charles. And this is my teaching resource that I created. So for my master's degree, I created my dissertation on a psychological support program for this demographic, which is young black male injured athletes. So I'll just be taking you step by step on the project I made, just talking about it and some of the interesting bits of research that I discovered. So as you can see a bit about myself, former semi-professional athlete until that came to an end when I fractured my tibia, tore my ACL and my meniscus. You can see a picture of me there on the left. Currently now, I'm a sports psychologist in training through the SEPA route, but I'm also doing working for Saracens Rugby Club as a youth mentor. And then you can see the picture on the right is me 5 years 5 years after I did lots of rehabilitation, got my mind right, and eventually was able enough to put myself in the deep end and have a fight. Um, so what was the resource? So the resource I created was a workshop to help sports psychologists, and the idea behind that was to help as many people as possible. So rather than me individually going out to help each of the athletes, I thought it'd be more effective if I give sports psychologists the understanding and the training. They can each themselves go and help more individuals than say me doing it by myself. So essentially was to help them work with this demographic, give them a better understanding of some of the experiences of young black male athletes, and kind of give them more confidence to work with them. So the resource was meant to be implemented through a trial or interactive workshop. Um, I again questions and ideas taken from each class, and it was meant to be offered as like an extra CPD hours, and offered mainly to support psychologists, but open to other professionals. So as you can see, there's just a quick snapshot of the actual project itself. Obviously, you can see it's 65 slides, and those are just some of the first slides that were part of the project. So what the resource contained, so as you can see, there was four different parts. Part one, why this resource is necessary. Part two, the experiences of young black male athletes. Part three, the foundations of working with this demographic. And then part four, how to help them throughout the rehabilitation phase. So I think part one was really key to get an understanding of why such a resource was necessary. And this is kind of going in line with the topic of this section, in that this demographic hasn't been targeted in terms of helping them. As you can see, all these different stats, as in black children are over 4 times more likely to be arrested than white children. More than 600 reports of online racist comments towards black England players. And obviously, the most important one is that there is not a resource readily available. And kind of seeing those stats and seeing how alarming it is, considering that obviously the recent abuse that's been going on with such young athletes. I mean, you only have to go as recent as seeing Vinicius Jr., the uproar that's been going on with him, against him, the racist abuse he's been receiving in Spain. So this is a very important issue that affects not only those in this country but around the world. But I think it's almost key to focus on those, yeah, again in this country. Um, so again, when I did my research, I also did it in the form of primary research by interviewing some athletes. So I interviewed some of these professional athletes who were in demographic, young black male, and they were injured or had recently suffered an injury. Um, as you can see from the quotes, they were saying things like they need a resource like this so they can relate to sports psychologists so that they can understand them better. And part of him saying this was that when he went into a room with a sports psychologist, he felt that there was a gap, as if they didn't understand him and the experiences and where he was coming from. And I know the whole idea is that you speak to people and you get an understanding of their troubles, but I think like that kind of unspoken role where it's they can't understand what he's been through and all the racism he's on all the racism that he's experienced. And similar with the athlete being, he said bridging that gap between the black and white athletes is important, and it's about time that makes the difference. So again, in elite sport, it's about making that 1% difference. And I think what he was trying to get at was that something like that, where they don't have to worry about that. Um, it's just a little hindrance that will make the difference. And then similarly, I also interviewed some sports psychologists, and then in their own words, they were saying psychology is not always diverse. So it is important to know about their background, i.e., it's good for them to have an additional resource where they're getting an insight to some of the experiences of these athletes that they may not be aware about. Particularly with this white sports psychologist, they were from the Midlands, and they hadn't had those encounters and just an understanding of what some of these athletes are going through or had been through. So the next part of part two was kind of getting experiences of these young black male athletes and bringing them across. And I think it was really important so that you can get an understanding. Obviously, these experiences fit for the majority of these young black athletes, but it is not the same case for all of them. Um, so in these experiences, I put some of the myths that they're likely to face. Myths like seeing a sports psychologist makes you weak. They will never get injured. They're too strong. Those are kind of common myths that surround it, that are in and around the black community that these black athletes kind of have spoken about and then they've heard amongst them. Similarly, in terms of these myths that these black men are physically superior, and then the kind of negative connotations in the media with always associating these black athletes as they're just quick, strong, and just relying them, putting them in that box as if they're reducing them to only a certain type of player or a certain type of athlete, failing to ignore their technical ability and just kind of, I guess it's really common in the media. It's how they're always labeled with those kind of words as opposed to actual their ability. So it's really important for me to have the facts and issues that they face, some common issues that they're likely to experience as a result of facing these issues, and how these issues affect them going forward. Um, so in that same breath, I think I mentioned that these can make them feel frustration, shock, anger. Again, going back to the Vinicius Junior example, there was that clip of him crying, and it just affects his performance. And these are the sort of things that the previous athlete was talking about, make that 1% difference. Like going through that when you're just trying to play a sport, which some of them was fun for them, but now they're having to deal with this racist abuse that obviously hinders their performance. So I thought it was really important to have some of the definitions as well. And I think it's with these three definitions between racism, discrimination, and microaggression, although they each they're all different, they still elicit the same effects. And I think it's really important knowing the difference, because racism, although it's defined as unfair things that people say, do, or think based on their belief that their own race makes them more intelligent or good or better than other people of other races. And similar with discrimination, the treatment of a person or particular group of people in a way that is worse, i.e. discriminate against them because of their sex, color, gender, sexuality. But the difference between microaggression is it's a small act or remark that still makes someone feel just as bad, however the intention is not there. But this remark can still have that same effect on these young individual. Um, and particularly that can go unnoticed by the individual who made the remark. And I think it's really important to understand that although it may not be in your intentions and you may not be aware of it, that still affects them going forward in the long term. And also I had a image of case study of Danny Rose. He was a former professional footballer, and he spoke out about his own experiences and how difficult it was for him, suffering through his injury, and how different it was for him being a black individual. And I think just it's really important having those individuals and athletes to speak up about their struggles and not be silenced by the media, and open up about it, creating that conversation that it's okay to talk about your struggles. It doesn't make you weak, which is one of the things that I picked up during my research, is that with these demographic, there's that stigma attached around speaking about their problems makes them weak, which is synonymous for just males in general, but even this demographic of young black males is that kind of stigma attached to, oh, they don't want to be seen as weak, or they can fight through it, or they can push through it. um, so it's key to kind of bring across how the emotions that it can elicit and the behavior and how it affects their performance in sport. And again, I thought it was also key to bring up my own experiences, been there, done it. As you can see in the picture, I'm one of the only black person in the picture, and in my own school, I was one of only two black people in the entire year group, and I kind of felt all those comments and all those stereotypes through my own performance and how it affected me in school, um, both the positive end and the negative end. You're kind of limited to a certain box, whether it's football, rugby, athletics. It's always, oh, you're going to be quick, you're going to be strong. So I thought it would be very powerful for the individuals to hear it from me directly and my own experiences. And I think it really does play effect in you, even to this day, in my sporting background and my performance. And part three is working the foundations of working them, and obviously mentioned the Rogerian pillars and how they can be helped and how they can be useful. Empathy, congruence, positive regard, that idea of showing that empathy towards the athlete, showing them that you really care. And I think one of the things that the athlete mentioned in his interview was that he kind of almost can tell whether they're being genuine, which again goes across the board for all sports psychologists, but I think particularly for this demographic, there's the kind of trust issues if they're just like a tick box exercise where they're only doing it, oh, that we're just doing it, we're just speaking to a young black individual because we have done it, and kind of showing their superiors that they've done it, but actually caring about them is a different aspect, and same with congruence and positive regard. And one of the main things that came from this project that I wanted to elicit from this project was changing the culture. And what that means is if I then can educate some of the sports psychologists and then they then go and work with the different athletes, that will hopefully inspire and change the culture for more young black male athletes to speak about their problems and their difficulties, particularly with injury. Um, the idea that after they get an injury, it doesn't make you weak. Um, it's okay to talk about your struggles. It's okay to open up, normalize speaking up, and then encourage. Hopefully, if they see their friends doing it, speaking up about their problems and their struggles, it will encourage others to seek help when they're struggling. And again, change that perception that speaking up makes you weak, and allow them to feel more comfortable seeking help from sports psychologists, um, and in general, just helping them to again change the culture so that they feel more comfortable about speaking up. Yeah, which I think is really, really important. So that was the main take home message of the project. And then obviously a bit more specific to injury, it's how to help them through the rehabilitation phase. You can see through the general injury protocols, and my supervisor at the time, Misha Jervis, was really helpful in actually helping move these aspects. So as you can see, we've got the ACT therapy. Um, the main aim obviously is to increase psychological flexibility. I think um, this was the most appropriate way of helping these athletes, that I thought we came together with. Um, yeah, again, encourage athletes to change their relationship with their thoughts and feelings, encourage the athletes to go through the rehabilitation process and leave with a set of personal values that they can always commit to when they're going through those difficulties. Um, whether it's struggling with racism or struggling with an injury, they can just look at their values and hold true to their values no matter how difficult things can be, and kind of like take it in their stride. And then obviously helping them through the signs and symptoms and what to observe. So you got the different stages of injury, you got the prior injury, injury, post injury, and so on and so forth, all up until their post rehabilitation phase. And I think it was really important to have a step-by-step guideline of how to help them and what the different signs look like. Are they a bit more reserved in different stages? So typically immediately post injury is where you like to see them retreat and kind of step back away from their friends and their family if they find it particularly difficult. And then again, trying to keep that line of communication where you're constantly checking up on them when they are um, have reverted back into their shell. And then I think one of the most important things was how maintaining that relationship post the rehabilitation phase. I think one of the main things that I found out was through my interviews with the athletes was that post rehabilitation phase, after they've been physically clear to return to sport, they kind of felt that the sports psychologist would kind of disappear. But one of the athletes spoke about how this one sports psychologist kept in constant contact with him and was able to check up on him, and he felt more valued as a he felt more valued because of this, and it felt like the sports psychologist genuinely cared about him, and it showed in his performance. So I think it's really important to continue to ask the athletes about their lives and maintain those regular checkups. And then again, the last section was obviously to suggestions for improvements. Obviously, with the different with the changes in society and things that happen over time, you have to look back at 2020, 21, where you had the Black Lives Matter movement and how that affects a project like this. So I think it's really important to stay current with the times and see how these things have an impact. Again, going back to the Vinicius Junior incident, which only happened over the weekend, seeing how that will affect athletes. Obviously, athletes are standing in solidarity with him, whether they're going to, it looks like, abstaining from playing in the matches or taking to social media to be more vocal about it. It's all about how we're going to help those athletes guide them through those difficult challenges. Yeah, that takes us to the end of the actual presentation. Are there any questions so far?